I am a lucky guy. When I worked in the video game industry, I got to work on a wide variety of titles. Now, most of them were sports games, I will give you that. But I did get to work on several racing games, and I do love racing titles. Now, the ones I worked on were simulations. They were the NASCAR Thunder series from EA Sports, but I've always loved racing games. And to this day, I think retro racing games are fantastic and they still hold up. What's going on, everybody? I'm Jay. Welcome to Square Pegs. Today I want to talk to you about 10 retro racing games that I think hold up just as well as any modern racing game does. We're going to kick things off on the original Xbox with one of my absolute favorites, Rally Sport Challenge.
Kicking things off with legitimately one of my favorite games on the original Xbox. And before you come at me and say the Xbox is not retro, the Xbox is now old enough to drink here in the States. It's retro. Deal with it. I love Rally Sport Challenge. Rally Sport Challenge was a game to me that I initially rented. We had a thing at EA called the IRC, which was a way for us to basically rent games and movies, take them home, give them a shot, bring them back. No charge. It was just a nice little service that they offered us. And Rally Sport Challenge was one of the first games I rented. And I remember absolutely being blown away by the gameplay that was offered here, because this wasn't like any other rally game I had ever played before. In fact, this was the only rally game I had ever played before at this time. Now, I've played stuff like McRae Dirt and stuff like that at this point, but at the time, this was the original rally game I had ever played, and I absolutely loved it. This was a game my friend Corey and I used to sit down and play together, and not necessarily multiplayer, but one of us would drive and the other one would call out the turns coming up and let us know what's going on, just like a real spotter in rally racing. Absolutely love this game. When I started collecting for the original Xbox again, this is one of the first ones I got. It is fantastic. Those of you that have seen my EA Sports Big ranking video might be a little bit surprised to see Freakstyle on here, because when I ranked the games in that video, I gave this a C, and I maintain, and I say this in comments every time that someone comments on the video, that was my biggest miss on every ranking video I have ever done. This game is spectacular. It is one of the best extreme sports games ever. It is a fantastic motorcycle racing game that is just over-the-top, ridiculous, and fantastic. It's SSX just on dirt bikes. It is motocross to the next level. It is such an over-the-top and ridiculous game that I cannot help but keep playing it. When I first played it, there was parts about the game I didn't dig, but the more I've played it, and it has been the game I have played consistently the most from all of those EA Big games since that time. This game has just been like my must-play game on the PS2. I absolutely love it. It is such a fun title, and it is so ridiculously over the top and enjoyable that you can't help but love it. Before a couple of years ago, I had never played Looney Tunes Space Race on the Sega Dreamcast. It was something that I saw at a Goodwill, of all places, in, I want to say, Mattawan, Michigan, and I just pulled the trigger on it. There was a bunch of Dreamcast games there. I said, yeah, sure, why not? I'll buy them all. I'll give them all a shot. You don't see Dreamcast stuff out in the wild very often. And one of the most pleasant surprises was Looney Tunes Space Race. It is a fantastic kart racer. You play as the different Looney Tunes characters. You are in space on rockets, and you are in a kart race. There's weapons to pick up. There's ridiculous levels to go through. All of the characters have a unique personality and a unique kind of style to the way that they perform and the way that they move. It's really, really fun. Does it break any molds? No, absolutely not. It does what it sets out to do. It's a fun kart racer, and really, sometimes that's all you need. I really love this one. This one is absolutely spectacular, and it's not an expensive game either, which is really nice to experience on the Dreamcast, because as we all know, the Dreamcast is getting really expensive to collect for. But Looney Tunes Space Race, really fun. Worth checking out if you haven't done so. The first game I bought for my Nintendo 64, when I finally got the console and I started going to video game conventions, was Beetle Adventure Racing. But why Beetle Adventure Racing? Of all the fantastic racing games on the Nintendo 64, why is this the one that captured me the most out of any other racing game? I wish I had an easy answer for you, but there's just some kind of style about this game that I really enjoy. For one, the levels are really long. This isn't a quick 1 minute in, 1 minute out lap that you're going to do for these levels. They're actually really lengthy, so you actually get a lot of gameplay experience going on here. I like the way the game controls. I love the way the game looks. Like, this is when the Beetle first came back. So this is like my nostalgia for that vehicle coming back at the time, was this game. It's just a really fun title. It's not something that's going to be really crazy. Like, this isn't going to blow you away if you've never played it before. But for those of us that have and remember this from back in the day on the N64, this is something that I know has a lot of positive memories based around it. It's a solid racer with a really fun concept, and it just delivers. It's a really, really awesome title. I have to thank Patreon supporter John for sending me this game. This is Virtual Racing on the Sega 32X, and for sending me the 32X now that I'm thinking about it. I have long been a fan of Virtual Racing, and I think this is one of the best games ever that Sega has made, especially just from their huge IP and their huge catalog of games. Virtual Racing is one of my favorites. Now, any of the Virtual games are great, whether it's racing, cop, or fighter. You can't go wrong. Or tennis. Tennis is great too. But Virtual Racing happens to be my favorite. It is a solid racing game that really leans into just the technological advancements that were offered by the 32X add-on and made something really incredible. Now, this is also fun in arcades. There's an incredible Switch port that is probably the best version of this game ever released. And there's also a Sega Saturn version or a Sega CD version. Let me know in the comments. I can't remember off the top of my head, and I'm too lazy to look it up. But there is another version on disc as well that's also excellent. You can't go wrong with really any version of Virtual Racing. They're all fantastic. Even the Genesis version was really good. But this one happens to be my personal favorite for retro gaming, is the 32X release. I won't spend a ton of time on this one. This is kind of an honorable mention because I kind of want to brag on a game I worked on here. And this is NASCAR 2005 Chase for the Cup. This was such a fun game to work on. The controls were great. It was a really solid racing title, and it absolutely crushed the feel of NASCAR. This was something that just worked. It was a lot of fun to play. It looked good. It sounded good. And it was one of the best NASCAR games of all time as far as I'm concerned. I really enjoyed working on this one. I don't care where the hell play this game. This game is always fun. This is Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. You can play this in the arcades. You can play this on the N64. You can play this, like I am here, on the Sega Dreamcast. And it is magnificent. Taking what was, frankly, a kind of bizarre series of scenes in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and making a racing game out of it with a pod racing is really brilliant in my eyes. I never really understood why we had that other than to show that Anakin had force powers, but to borrow that kind of racing setup and to use that circuit as an inspiration for a video game is just a stroke of genius. Because you get to use all the characters from that scene. You get to go to all these different worlds in the Star Wars universe on these imagined and fantastic race courses. It's just brilliant. I think the only one that is actually kind of realized from the film is the Tatooine one from Boon to Eve. And it's fantastic. It's absolutely wonderful. This game does something that I didn't think was really possible. It took a Star Wars license and made it work when it wasn't just a straight-up role-playing game or an action game. It made a racing game that was fun. Now, don't play any other Star Wars racing games. Don't do that. That's a bad idea. But Episode 1 Racer is legit. Got to thank my buddy Kevin from the Game On Network for selling me this copy last year. This is Outrun 2 on the original Xbox, and this is a little bit different than the other racing games on this list. Those are more head-to-head racing. This is kind of racing against the clock, and I love it because I'm a huge fan of the Outrun series. I loved it in the arcades. I loved it on the Master System. Loved it on the Genesis, loved it on the 3DS. It's just a wonderful driving or racing series, and this one on the Xbox is no different. It is absolutely spectacular. You get a solid visual upgrade from the originals. The soundtrack is still magnificent, the courses are still fun and challenging, and just simple arcade goodness. And really, that's all you need in an Outrun game, is something that's going to get you point A to point B as fast as you possibly can. Game is brilliant. It's one of my favorites on the Xbox. It is absolutely worth playing if you haven't done so. It's a little bit pricey, I will say that. The cost on this one is a little bit higher than... I don't want to say that it should be, but it is higher than I would have expected when I was originally looking for it. But you won't regret paying the price. It's really fun. If you guys have been around for a while, you know I am a big fan of licensed video games, and Biker Mice from Mars on the Super Nintendo is one of my favorite licensed games from that generation. Not only is it based on an absolutely obscure property from a cartoon that lasted a few seasons, it's also a badass top-down racing game that somehow does top-down racing better than other top-down racing games on the Super Nintendo. So it's kind of an isometric view. You get to control one of the characters from the series, and you have a series of tracks that you go through. It is a classic racing game. It is not overly complex. It's a kart racer. There's weapons to use. It's just a lot of fun, and it's got a lot of style to it as well, with some amazing visuals and fantastic sound that aren't really equaled by other top-down racers, with like the exception of Rock and Roll Racing, which I promise I won't talk about in this video. I tend to talk about that whenever I bring up racing games. I talk about Rock and Roll Racing, but we won't this time. But if you have not played Biker Mice from Mars, this is one that absolutely needs to be checked out, because it does something really remarkable with very little. Like the animated series was fine, it was fun, but it didn't really offer much as far as inspiration for what a video game could be. And when they could have gone one direction and made something that was like a side-scrolling platformer or something like that, they actually leaned into the property and made an amazing racing game. Check this one out if you haven't had the chance to do so. Not gonna lie to you, I wasn't a huge fan of the F-Zero series when it initially launched on the Super Nintendo. My first exposure to the game was just the original SNES release, and there was something about the Mode 7 graphics in that game that just did not work in my head. It gave me a headache playing it. So I didn't really give F-Zero a huge amount of chances until F-Zero on the N64 and this one here, F-Zero GX on the Nintendo GameCube. Now, this is a sort of home port of the F-Zero arcade game, and this game is unbelievable. It is one of the fastest video games I've ever played. It just feels like speed personified. The tracks are incredible, the music is great, the visuals are stunning, and this game does amazing work by giving you not only this just solid core port or kind of home experience of what the arcade version was, it also has all of the arcade tracks in it, so you're not just left hanging wanting more. It's unbelievable. This game is a masterpiece, an absolute masterpiece, and one of the best games that Nintendo has ever made. I am so pissed off that we haven't gotten more F-Zero games released. It's just so fantastic. I miss this franchise. I wish it would come back regularly. I hadn't planned on putting a Mario Kart game on this list, but someone asked me the other day what my favorite Mario Kart game was. And while I love Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and I really love Mario Kart Double Dash, I really have to give my favorite to Mario Kart DS. And there's a lot of reasons for that. First of all, it's a beautiful game for what it is. Like, as old as the DS system is, this puts out some really impressive 3D graphics, and the controls are spectacular. The levels are great. The character selection is wonderful. The music is fantastic. Like, this is all stuff you would expect from a Mario Kart game, right? But where this game really excels for me, and where this one sets itself apart from every other Mario Kart game ever, is the fact that you can play a multiplayer game, but you only need one cartridge. With DS Download Play, you can share this with other people. They'll play as a shy guy, but they'll be able to hop in game and play on any courses that you've unlocked and play a regular round of Mario Kart. We used to do this all the time at EA. We would go on our breaks, we'd go into the big conference room, and we would all boot up our DSs, and if we didn't have it, we'd be able to download it and play amongst our friends. It was a fantastic game then, it's still a fantastic game today, and it is absolutely worth playing. It's one of my favorites. It is my favorite Mario Kart of all time.
Racing is timeless. It is something we have done either on foot or on chariot all the way back to the ancient Olympiad, and it's something that I think we can all understand. Guy goes fast, guy wins. Video games translate that so well, and these retro games are things that I treasure and I adore to this day. Let me know in the comments down below your favorite retro racing games. I would love to hear from you. If this is your first time here, I'd encourage you to click subscribe. I do a couple videos a week, do a short every day, and I love talking about the best in retro gaming. Until next time, folks, I've been Jay. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. Remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.